Near the end of World War II, Nazi Germany turned to extreme and desperate machines in a gamble to reverse its looming defeat. Tanks grew enormous, bristling with weapons.
It could fire a massive shell over 10 scores of miles.
Planes pushed the boundaries of speed in ways the world had never seen. Some of these weapons terrified their enemies and inspired panic. Others failed spectacularly, collapsing under the weight of ambition and poor planning. But every creation revealed a mix of desperation and audacious innovation as leaders ignored reality and consequences in a frantic race against time. Tiger I, the iron beast that stopped armies cold. In 1941, Germany's army faced a shock that no one had expected. Soviet tanks, the T-34 and KV-1, moved faster, hit harder, and shrugged off shells that had once destroyed everything in their path. German soldiers were stunned. Entire panzer divisions found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered. Hitler demanded a solution. He asked for something terrifying and unstoppable. The answer was the Tiger I. The Tiger I was enormous. Weighing nearly 57 tons of armor and steel, it seemed indestructible. Its 88mm gun could obliterate enemy tanks from over a kilometer away. Soldiers who saw it described it as a rolling fortress. Crews often destroyed their targets before the enemy knew they were spotted. On the battlefield, Tigers became monsters. Michael Wittmann, one of the most famous German tank aces, used a single Tiger to devastate entire Allied columns. At Villers-Bocage, he destroyed dozens of tanks in a matter of hours. German commanders treated Tigers as elite tools of war. They were sent to punch holes through enemy lines or defend key positions. In Africa, a single Tiger could dominate open terrain. Its presence alone could force Allied tanks to retreat or maneuver carefully to avoid destruction. Fear spread faster than the Tiger itself. Soldiers dreaded facing it because a single shot could end the fight. Yet the Tiger I was far from perfect. It guzzled fuel, moved slowly, and broke down frequently. Mud, snow, and weak bridges could trap it. Crews often abandoned the tanks without firing a shot. Germany produced only about 1,347 Tigers, and many never fired a single shell in anger. Despite these problems, captured Tigers were studied by the Allies after the war, influencing tank designs for decades. The Tiger I was more than a machine. It was a symbol of terror, of engineering genius, and of the limits of brute force. On the battlefield, it could decide the outcome of a fight. In history, it became a reminder that technology could inspire awe, fear, and respect, even when it could not change the course of a war. Tiger II, the King Tiger, built too late. By 1944, Germany wanted something bigger, stronger, and deadlier. So the Tiger II, or King Tiger, was born. Its massive armor sloped in a way that made frontal attacks almost useless. It carried a longer 88mm gun, capable of destroying almost any enemy tank at extreme range. On the battlefield, it was a nightmare for anyone who faced it. Stories of lone King Tigers spreading chaos reached the Allied lines. A single tank could stop an entire advance. Enemy crews knew the danger instantly. Its thick frontal armor could survive hits from almost every Allied gun. The Tiger II was both a physical and psychological weapon. It created fear before it even fired a shot. But it had deadly flaws. Weighing around 70 tons, it strained engines to the breaking point. Fuel was scarce, repairs were difficult, and production was painfully slow. Fewer than 500 were built. In forests, towns, or narrow terrain, even a King Tiger could be trapped or flanked. Allied aircraft were relentless, striking at its weaker points. But despite its flaws, the King Tiger became a legend. Its design influenced tank development worldwide. It showed the terrifying potential of heavy armor and long-range firepower, but it also proved that sheer power could be a liability. On the battlefield, timing, numbers, and logistics mattered as much as strength. The King Tiger was awe-inspiring, deadly, and ultimately too late to save Germany. Maus and Ratte, when size became madness. As Germany faced defeat, some engineers chased impossible ideas. The Maus was a 188-ton tank, almost impossible to move. Its armor was nearly untouchable, and its 128mm gun could destroy anything in its path. But it was painfully slow. could not cross most bridges, and only 2 prototypes were ever built. The Maus never even fired a single shot in battle. Even more extreme was the P.1000 Ratti, a 1,000-ton land battleship with massive naval guns. Moving it would destroy roads, but Allied air attacks would have instantly destroyed it before it even moved. Even the Germans had to admit that it was a fantasy. It never left the drawing board. These machines were engineering marvels, but they were useless in actual war. Resources spent on them could have built practical weapons that might have changed battles. The Maus and Rat represent the dangers of obsession with size and firepower over reality, yet their stories are thrilling. They show how far ambition can stretch in desperation. They are reminders that in war, innovation is only valuable if it can be used. Me-262, the jet that changed the sky. Germany reached for the skies in ways no one expected. The Me-262 was the first operational jet fighter in history. It was faster than any propeller plane and carried 4 30mm cannons capable of shredding Allied bombers to pieces in seconds. Pilots chasing it often found it disappeared before they could even reach it. But development was a nightmare. Engines were unreliable, fuel was scarce, and Allied bombers constantly destroyed factories. Hitler delayed it further by insisting on a bomber version. By the time the jets flew in combat in 1945, Germany was collapsing, and only a small number saw action. Despite its limited use, the Me-262 changed aviation forever. Its speed and firepower forced the Allies to rethink air combat. Captured jets were studied in the United States and the Soviet Union. Designs from the Me-262 influenced all post-war jets and marked the birth of the jet age. Horten Ho 229, the flying wing jet. In early 1944, the German Luftwaffe tested an aircraft unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Horten Ho 229 was a jet-powered flying wing. It had no tail, no traditional fuselage, just one massive wing. Its strange shape was designed for speed and stealth, making it harder for radar to detect. The Ho 229 could have changed the sky if Germany had the time and fuel to deploy it. The plane carried 2 Jumo 004 engines, the same engines used in the Me-262. They were hidden inside the wings to reduce drag. This gave the Ho 229 the potential to fly faster than any Allied fighter and strike targets deep inside enemy territory. The first prototype was a glider, tested to ensure stability. Later that year, the jet-powered version took to the air. Engineers were stunned by its performance. Despite its promise, the Ho 229 faced deadly limits. Germany lacked fuel and safe testing conditions. The second prototype crashed in early 1945, raising fears about control at high speed. A third jet was still under construction when the war ended. The Americans captured the prototype and studied it carefully. They recognized that its design could reduce radar visibility decades before stealth technology officially existed. The Ho 229 never flew in combat, but its ideas shaped the future. Flying wing designs would later inspire stealth bombers like the B-2 Spirit. For a brief moment, it represented the edge of aviation technology. It was a machine ahead of its time that could have changed the balance of air power. V-2 rocket, the first ballistic missile. The V-2 rocket was more than a weapon. It was a breakthrough in technology and terror. Standing over 12 meters tall and weighing 13 tons, it became the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. Once launched, it flew into the edge of space before crashing down at supersonic speed. Targets had no warning and no chance to defend. Beginning in 1944, V-2 rockets rained down on London and Antwerp. Hundreds were fired, killing thousands of civilians. Military experts noted that despite its destructive power, the V-2 did not change the war's outcome. It was expensive, inaccurate, and difficult to deploy. Factories were constantly bombed, and launch sites were under threat. Behind the technology was a darker truth. The rockets were built using forced labor from concentration camps. Thousands died from exhaustion, starvation, and abuse. More people perished building the V-2 than from its attacks. But most unsettling, Wernher von Braun and his entire team, who designed the rocket, were later taken to America to continue their work in space exploration. The V-2's legacy is profound. It changed the psychology of war. proving destruction could arrive from the sky without warning. The rocket was a mix of technological genius and human horror, opening the door to modern missile technology and spaceflight.
Type 21.
Electroboot, the first true submarine.
Germany's final hope at sea was the Type 21 U-boat, a submarine built to dominate underwater warfare. Unlike earlier submarines, which behaved mostly like surface ships, the Type 21 was designed to live beneath the waves. It could move faster underwater than most ships on the surface.
Its secret was power. 3 times the battery capacity of older U-boats allowed it to reach over 17 knots submerged. A streamlined hull reduced noise and drag, and silent electric motors made it almost invisible. It could stay submerged for days. Using a snorkel, it ran diesel engines while barely surfacing, avoiding detection from radar. The Type 21 also featured an automated torpedo reload system, allowing repeated attacks without surfacing. On paper, it was terrifying. Germany planned to build hundreds, but the war ended before they could. Many boats were incomplete or unsafe, only a handful were operational, and just 2 went on patrol. Neither sank a ship. After the war, the Allies studied the Type 21 carefully. Its design became the foundation for modern submarines worldwide. It failed in combat, but it defined the future of undersea warfare. It was a machine built too late to save Germany, but early enough to change how the world thought about submarines forever. Jagdtiger, the heaviest combat vehicle ever. The Jagdtiger pushed German obsession with size and firepower to the extreme. Built on the Tiger II chassis, it was the heaviest operational combat vehicle of World War II. Weighing nearly 75 tons, it carried a gun capable of destroying any Allied tank at extreme range. Its frontal armor could withstand almost all attacks. The Jagdtiger was meant for defense. It was designed to sit in ambush positions, picking off advancing enemy units. In theory, one could hold back an entire assault, but in reality, it was a mechanical nightmare. Its massive engine and drivetrain were under constant strain. Breakdowns were common. Fuel consumption was extreme. Moving it across rough terrain or bridges was often impossible. Only around 70 to 80 Jagdtigers were built. Crews respected their power but feared their unreliability. Many were lost without firing a shot, abandoned because they could not move or ran out of fuel. When deployed correctly, the Jagdtiger could dominate, destroying tanks from distances enemies could not reach. But war rarely gave perfect conditions. The Jagdtiger is remembered as a symbol of German over-engineering. It combined unmatched power with severe limitations, showing the danger of prioritizing size and strength over mobility and practicality. It was awe-inspiring, deadly, and yet fragile in its own way. Sturmtiger, a weapon built to erase cities. The Sturmtiger was not a tank built to fight other tanks. It was built to destroy buildings, crush cities, and erase resistance. Developed in late 1944 after brutal urban combat, the vehicle mounted a massive rocket-propelled mortar on the chassis of a Tiger I. The shells it fired weighed hundreds of kilograms. Each one had the power to demolish entire structures, flatten fortified positions, and kill anyone caught nearby. The explosion was terrifying, both physically and psychologically. Civilians and soldiers alike feared the blast even before it happened. The Sturmtiger's design reflected Germany's experience with city fighting. When ordinary tanks proved too weak against reinforced buildings, engineers turned to sheer destructive power. But the vehicle was not without its flaws. It was slow, cumbersome, and difficult to maneuver. Its armor was thick, but it could not hide from artillery, mines, or even poor roads. Reloading the massive mortar was time-consuming, leaving the crew exposed to enemy fire. Ammunition was limited, so each shot had to count. Only a small number were ever built, making the Sturmtiger a rare and specialized weapon. Despite its limitations, the Sturmtiger saw action in some of the most intense urban battles of the war. During the Warsaw Uprising, it crushed barricades and fortified positions, leaving devastation in its wake. In the Battle of the Bulge, it wreaked havoc on Allied lines, but its impact was limited by its rarity and slow speed. Too few were deployed, and their specialized design made them unsuitable for broader battlefield strategy. The psychological impact of the Sturmtiger was as important as its physical firepower. German propaganda highlighted its devastating ability to demolish enemy fortifications, hoping to intimidate Allied forces. Soldiers on the receiving end reported that even a single shell could demoralize entire units, forcing retreats and creating chaos in urban environments. Its fearsome reputation spread faster than its deployment, becoming a legend in both German and Allied circles. The Sturmtiger remains a symbol of extreme military engineering. It illustrates the terrifying combination of human ingenuity and sheer destructive intent. This vehicle was not built to win conventional battles. Instead, it was built to instill fear, to obliterate entire neighborhoods, and to leave destruction that would be remembered long after the war ended. Kugelpanzer, the Mystery Sphere. Among the strangest armored vehicles of World War II, the Kugelpanzer stands out as a riddle wrapped in steel. Shaped like a rolling metal sphere, it had extremely thin armor and room for only one person. Its purpose remains a mystery, even decades after the war ended. The Kugelpanzer was captured by Soviet forces, yet no documentation explains how it was supposed to be used. The vehicle moved slowly on two hemispherical wheels, offering almost no protection to its operator. Visibility was minimal, and no weapons were mounted. Yet it made it to battlefields, demonstrating that someone thought it might serve a function. Theories abound about its real purpose. Some historians suggest it might have been built for reconnaissance, artillery spotting, or even as a mobile observation platform. But none fully explain its unusual design or practicality. Only one example survives today, housed in a Russian museum. Historians and engineers alike have studied it, marveling at its engineering and questioning the logic behind its creation. The Kugelpanzer reflects the extremes of innovation when resources are limited and defeat is looming. Its mystery captures the imagination because it challenges everything we know about armored vehicles. It shows that war does not just produce practical machines, but also strange and enigmatic creations. Goliath tracked mine, the first ground drone. The Goliath tracked mine looked deceptively like a toy, but it carried deadly potential. Developed by Germany during World War II, this small, remote-controlled vehicle was packed with explosives and guided via a long control cable that could extend hundreds of meters. Its mission was deceptively simple, but deadly. Drive under enemy tanks, fortifications, or bunkers and detonate, potentially destroying heavy equipment while keeping German soldiers safely behind the lines. The idea of sending a machine to risk destruction rather than a person was revolutionary for the 1940s, reflecting a growing fascination with mechanized warfare. The Goliath represented one of the earliest attempts at creating unmanned combat vehicles, a concept that would echo decades later in modern robotics and drone technology. In practice, the Goliath faced serious challenges. Its speed was painfully slow, often only a few miles per hour, making it easy prey for even lightly armed infantry. The vehicle's thin metal casing offered almost no protection against small arms fire or shrapnel, and the exposed control cable could be severed or tangled by terrain obstacles, rendering the device useless. Soldiers had to carefully navigate the Goliath across rough terrain, rubble, and mud, often under enemy fire, making successful operations rare. Even when deployed effectively, the vehicle's small size limited the amount of explosives it could carry, reducing its destructive potential against heavily armored targets. Moreover, its use demanded careful planning. Crews needed to ensure that the terrain was passable, that the target was isolated enough to avoid collateral damage, and that the operator maintained line of sight to control the device, all under battlefield stress. Some field reports describe crews struggling to maneuver the vehicle over trenches or debris while under sniper fire, highlighting the real danger despite the machine's remote operation. The Goliath's psychological impact was significant. Enemy soldiers were often unnerved by the sight of a small, seemingly harmless machine moving steadily toward their positions, knowing it could explode at any moment. Countering it became a tactical concern, with troops improvising shields, small arms fire, and barricades to neutralize the threat. German engineers had high hopes for this machine. so they produced thousands despite the operational challenges. Production and maintenance required considerable effort, as each unit was prone to mechanical failure, and the control cables were difficult to repair in the field. The Goliath's deployment during major battles such as Normandy and the Eastern Front provided German forces with a technological novelty, though its overall battlefield effectiveness remained limited. Nevertheless, it demonstrated that war could extend beyond direct human engagement, foreshadowing the increasing role of unmanned machines in later conflicts. The Goliath tracked mine represents one of the first attempts to mechanize battlefield operations with unmanned systems. While flawed, it provided valuable lessons in remote-controlled explosives and early robotics. Triebflügel, a fighter that never landed. The Triebflügel was one of Germany's most audacious and experimental aircraft concepts, conceived in response to the relentless Allied bombing of Luftwaffe airfields. Conventional aircraft required long runways for takeoff and landing, which were increasingly dangerous as Allied strikes intensified. The Triebflügel offered a radical solution, a vertical takeoff and landing fighter powered by 3 rotating wings, each tipped with a small jet engine. This meant the aircraft could theoretically launch from almost any location, bypassing the vulnerability of traditional airfields entirely. The design reflected a remarkable blend of helicopter and airplane principles, anticipating future concepts in VTOL vertical takeoff and landing aircraft decades before they became practical. It was also emblematic of the extreme innovation occurring in Germany at the time, where engineers were willing to explore high-risk ideas to try to regain control of a rapidly deteriorating war situation. The design was both ingenious and perilous. The rotating wings acted as both lift-generating rotors and propulsion units, spinning at incredibly high speeds. Controlling such an aircraft would have demanded extraordinary skill and nerves, as landing required the pilot to align the craft precisely, with almost no room for error. Structural stresses on the wings were immense, and vibration from 3 jet-tipped rotors posed serious mechanical risks. The engines of the era were temperamental, and fuel supply issues made sustained operation improbable. In addition, the unusual aerodynamics meant that even minor miscalculations could lead to catastrophic instability. Only theoretical models were ever built. A working prototype was never completed. Contemporary design notes indicate that engineers worried about resonance frequencies in the rotating wings, which could have literally torn the aircraft apart in flight, underscoring the extreme danger involved in testing. Beyond engineering hurdles, the Triebflügel reflected Germany's desperation in the war's final months. As resources dwindled and defeat loomed, engineers were pushed to develop ideas that could potentially turn the tide, even if the concepts were wildly impractical. Some designers viewed the project as a way to inspire national morale, demonstrating that innovation and technological audacity could still challenge the Allies despite overwhelming odds. Documents suggest that some German planners envisioned mass-producing these aircraft to overwhelm Allied forces with vertical takeoff fighters capable of launching almost anywhere. Despite never reaching operational reality, the project illustrates the lengths to which wartime necessity could drive innovation, and the willingness to explore radical departures from conventional aviation principles. The Triebflügel remains an enduring example of impossible ambition in aviation, inspiring engineers and historians to consider the limits of technological imagination under extreme pressure. Focke-Wulf Fw 223, the first real helicopter. As one of the first operational helicopters, the Focke-Wulf Fw 223 represented a groundbreaking achievement in aviation. Developed in Germany during World War II, it was intended to perform missions impossible for conventional aircraft. Its vertical lift capabilities allowed it to operate in mountainous terrain, forests, and urban zones where runways were scarce or non-existent. The helicopter's tasks ranged from transporting supplies to evacuating wounded soldiers and conducting reconnaissance over enemy territory, making it a highly versatile tool for the German military. The FW223's twin rotor system was designed to counteract torque, offering a stability advantage that would influence later helicopter designs around the world. Its development also reflected a growing understanding of vertical lift technology, including rotor blade aerodynamics and torque management that were still experimental in the 1940s. The FW223 was a remarkable engineering feat. Its twin rotor design offered stability and balance while carrying relatively heavy loads for its time. However, production faced constant setbacks. Allied bombings destroyed critical factories, limiting the number of helicopters that could be built. The machines that were completed often required meticulous maintenance and were prone to mechanical failures, reflecting the complexity of early rotorcraft technology. Pilots had to master the unique controls of vertical flight, a skill far more demanding than flying conventional planes of the era. Additionally, spare parts and fuel shortages often grounded even functional machines, making planning and deployment a logistical puzzle. Historical records note that engineers experimented with auxiliary equipment, including lightweight reconnaissance cameras, radio communication systems, and even provisions for carrying light medical supplies or small payloads for tactical missions. The helicopter's operational use, though limited, demonstrated its practical value. Supplies could reach frontline units stranded in areas inaccessible to trucks or fixed-wing aircraft, and reconnaissance flights provided critical intelligence that might otherwise have been impossible. Engineers also experimented with carrying small weapons, envisioning combat applications that were ahead of their time. Field reports indicated that the FW223 could hover steadily over forests and urban terrain, allowing for scouting and tactical observation that no other Luftwaffe aircraft could achieve. Despite the logistical and technical hurdles, the FW223 proved that vertical lift could be more than just an experimental curiosity. It could be an effective, if niche, military tool. It set a precedent for the post-war helicopter boom in the United States, Soviet Union, and beyond, serving as a technical bridge between concept and operational rotorcraft. Heinkel He 162, the People's Jet. The Heinkel He 162, nicknamed the Volksjäger, or People's Jet, was Germany's response to the overwhelming Allied air superiority in late World War II. As the Luftwaffe suffered devastating losses, the leadership sought a jet fighter that could be built quickly, cheaply, and flown by young, minimally trained pilots. The aircraft was designed for rapid production using modular construction techniques, allowing components to be assembled in small workshops far from bombed-out factories. Its single engine mounted above the fuselage streamlined aerodynamics and minimized build complexity, reflecting both ingenuity and desperation. The He 162 also showcased innovations such as lightweight alloys, welded fuselage sections, and simplified control surfaces, which were unprecedented in mass-produced aircraft of the period. Construction and operation of the He 162 were fraught with challenges. Factories operated under extreme pressure, often using forced labor with limited technical skill. Test pilots reported that the aircraft was prone to structural failures during high-speed maneuvers, and crashes were alarmingly common even before combat deployment. Training young pilots to fly such a jet safely was nearly impossible, and in practice, many missions became fatal for the operator as well as dangerous to the enemy. Despite these hazards, the He 162 could reach speeds over 560 miles per hour, climb rapidly, and potentially intercept Allied bombers at high altitude, demonstrating a remarkable technological achievement given the circumstances. Wartime accounts reveal that maintenance crews often had to perform emergency fixes using improvised tools, highlighting both the ingenuity and desperation embedded in the program. Engineers also explored fitting lightweight cannon or rocket armaments for last-minute operational plans, though fuel shortages and collapsing supply chains limited their actual deployment. The jet's development epitomized Germany's wartime desperation. Engineers had to innovate within extreme constraints, balancing performance with the realities of material shortages, bombing disruptions, and a collapsing industrial infrastructure. Test flights were conducted under the constant threat of Allied attacks, and pilots had to adapt quickly to the aircraft's high-speed handling and precarious stability. The aircraft's design included safety features such as a jettisonable nose and emergency ejection mechanisms, yet these were still experimental and largely untested in combat. Despite the high-risk environment, the He-162 was successfully flown and briefly deployed, a testament to both its engineering and the extraordinary efforts of those who built and piloted it. Post-war, captured He-162s were studied by Allied engineers, influencing early jet fighter development in both the US and the Soviet Union. The He-162 represents a remarkable achievement in rapid aircraft design under wartime urgency. Though it arrived too late to affect the war, it highlighted what could be accomplished under extreme pressure and influenced post-war jet development in multiple countries. Make sure to click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos.